Imagine living in a world where every sunset could be your last. No cities, no roads, no walls, only endless forests, towering mountains, and darkness that belonged to something else. Because long before humans ruled the earth, the night belonged to wolves. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, ancient forests came alive with sounds that sent fear through every living creature. Branches snapped, leaves rustled, and somewhere beyond the trees, glowing eyes watched from the darkness. For prehistoric humans, night wasn't a time to rest. It was a time to survive. They weren't the fastest animals. They weren't the strongest. They didn't have sharp claws or powerful jaws. Compared to the predators around them, humans were surprisingly fragile. So every evening, they gathered around fire. Not for comfort, for protection. The flames gave them light. The smoke masked their scent, and together, they hoped it would be enough. But just beyond the circle of light, the wolves waited, patient, silent, watching every movement. For thousands of years, humans and wolves lived as enemies. Both hunted the same animals. Both competed for the same food. And both feared what the other might do. If a lone human wandered too far from the group, a hungry wolf pack might be waiting. If wolves approached a human camp, they were driven away with fire and spears. Neither trusted the other. Neither had any reason to, or so it seemed, because something unexpected was happening, something neither humans nor wolves could understand. Both species were fighting the exact same battle. Every winter, food became harder to find. The great herds moved across vast distances. Some years they disappeared almost entirely. Hunters returned to camp with empty hands. Wolf packs wandered for days without a successful hunt. Hunger didn't care whether you walked on 2 legs or 4. It came for everyone, and hunger changes behavior. It forces impossible decisions. A starving wolf will take risks that a healthy wolf never would. A starving human will do the same. Then, one winter changed everything. It arrived colder than anyone could remember. Snow covered the valleys, the rivers froze, the forests grew silent. Even the strongest hunters struggled to survive. Each day, human camps grew weaker. Each night, wolf packs grew thinner. The distance between hunter and hunted began to disappear. One evening, as the last light faded behind the mountains, a small human tribe gathered around a dying fire. The day's hunt had failed again. The adults divided what little food remained. There wasn't enough. Not even close. Children ate first. The hunters took almost nothing. No one complained, because tomorrow they would have to hunt again. Then, a sound came from beyond the firelight. Not loud. Just one careful step. Every head turned. The hunters reached for their wooden spears. The children moved closer to the center of the camp, beyond the flames. A single wolf stood motionless. It wasn't growling. It wasn't preparing to attack. It simply watched. Its ribs showed through its fur. Its eyes looked tired. It was just as hungry as the humans. For a long moment, neither side moved. The fire crackled. Snow drifted through the air. 2 species that had feared each other for thousands of years stood face to face, neither knowing that history was about to change forever. The wolf didn't move. Neither did the humans. The only sound was the fire, crackling between them. For what felt like forever, they simply watched each other. One wrong move, and someone would die. Then, the wolf took a single step backward. It lowered its head, not in surrender, not in fear, almost as if it understood the danger of coming any closer. Moments later, it disappeared into the darkness. The hunters didn't sleep much that night. Neither did the wolf. The next evening, it returned. This time, it stayed even farther from the fire, hidden behind the trees, watching, waiting. Again, the humans chased it away. Not with spears, but with shouting and burning branches. The wolf fled, but it wasn't gone forever. Night after night, it came back, always keeping its distance, always watching the strange creatures who walked on 2 legs. The humans began noticing something unusual. The wolf never attacked. Even when children wandered close to the edge of the camp, it stayed back. It wasn't stalking them. It wasn't hunting them. It seemed interested, but cautious, just like they were. Then, something unexpected happened. After another unsuccessful hunt, one of the hunters threw a cracked bone away from the fire. It landed near the edge of the camp. The humans barely noticed. But the wolf did. It waited. Long after everyone had fallen asleep. Only when the fire had nearly burned out did it quietly approach. One careful step, then another. Its ears stayed alert. Its eyes searched every shadow. The scent of humans surrounded it. Every instinct told it to run. But hunger whispered something stronger. The wolf reached the bone, snatched it, and vanished into the darkness. By sunrise, it was gone, leaving behind only paw prints in the snow. The same thing happened again, and again, and again. Weeks passed. The wolf stopped coming only after the fires had died. Instead, it arrived while the flames still flickered, still far away, but closer than before. The humans noticed. The wolf noticed too. Neither side admitted it, but both were becoming a little less afraid. One evening, a child saw the wolf before anyone else. Instead of shouting, the child simply watched. The wolf watched back. The child held a small piece of leftover meat. The adults were busy repairing spears. No one noticed. Slowly, the child placed the meat on a flat stone, then stepped backward. The wolf didn't move. Minutes passed. The fire crackled softly. Ash drifted through the cold air. The child waited. The wolf waited. Finally, after the humans had turned away, the wolf crept forward. It picked up the meat. This time, it didn't run immediately. For just one heartbeat, the wolf looked toward the child, then disappeared into the forest. Neither of them understood it. But something extraordinary had just happened. For thousands of years, humans and wolves had met with fear. Tonight, they had exchanged trust. Not because either species wanted friendship, not because either understood the future, but because survival sometimes rewards the impossible. The visits became more frequent. Soon, the lone wolf was no longer alone. Another appeared, then another. They never entered the camp. They never begged for food. They simply waited, just beyond the light. The humans began leaving behind the bones they couldn't use. The wolves cleaned the campsite. Nothing was wasted. Without realizing it, both species had begun helping each other. Then, one night, everything changed. A deep growl echoed through the valley. It wasn't coming from the familiar wolf. It came from somewhere farther in the forest. The humans froze. The wolves froze too. Something larger was nearby. And for the very first time, the wolves weren't watching the humans. They were watching the darkness behind them. The growl came again. Lower, closer. The familiar wolves stiffened. Their ears pointed toward the forest. Their eyes locked onto the darkness beyond the camp. The humans couldn't see what they were looking at, but the wolves could. Without warning, the lone wolf let out a sharp bark. Once. Then again. It wasn't a hunting call. It was a warning. The humans immediately grabbed their spears. Parents pulled their children behind the fire. Everyone stared into the darkness. Then, a massive cave bear emerged from the trees. It was far larger than any wolf. Hungry. Powerful. And completely unafraid. The bear stepped toward the camp. The humans tightened their grip on their spears. They had faced predators before. But not like this. The familiar wolves didn't run. Instead, they circled behind the bear, barking, snapping, keeping its attention away from the humans. The bear turned toward them. Just for a moment, that was all the humans needed. With loud shouts, burning branches, and a wall of sharpened spears, the tribe drove the bear back into the forest. Silence returned. The wolves were gone. So was the bear. The humans never saw where they went. But something had changed. That night, the camp was still standing. Not because of humans alone, and not because of wolves alone, but because, for a few extraordinary moments, they had survived together. The visits continued. Winter slowly gave way to spring. The forests became greener. The rivers began to flow again. Food became easier to find. Yet, the wolves kept returning. They no longer came only when they were starving. Sometimes, they simply rested beyond the edge of the camp, watching, listening, learning. The humans noticed something else. Whenever wolves stayed nearby, other predators stayed away. The scent of a wolf pack warned dangerous animals to keep their distance. At the same time, the wolves discovered something valuable. Human hunters were remarkably good at finding prey. They could throw spears, drive herds into narrow valleys, and leave behind scraps that wolves could eat. For the first time, both species had found something more valuable than food. They had found an advantage. Years passed. Children who had once hidden behind the fire grew into hunters. Wolf pups who had followed their parents grew into adults, and those pups learned something their ancestors never had. Humans were not always enemies. The calmest wolves stayed closest to camp. The most aggressive ones stayed in the wild. Generation after generation, the difference slowly grew. No one noticed it happening, because evolution rarely announces itself. It whispers, one generation at a time. The wolves that tolerated humans had an easier life. They found food more often. Their pups survived more frequently. Those pups inherited more than their parents' appearance. Some also inherited their temperament. They were slightly calmer, slightly less fearful, slightly more curious. Tiny differences, repeated across hundreds of generations, began changing an entire species. And humans were changing too. Hunters learned to read the wolves' behavior: a raised tail, pinned ears, a sudden stare into the trees. The wolves often sensed danger before humans even knew it was there. Over time, they stopped being two separate groups, sharing the same forest. They became partners. Nobody planned it. There was no agreement, no grand decision, no single moment when wolves suddenly became dogs. Instead, it happened so slowly that no one alive could see it. But if you could stand in that ancient forest and watch the centuries pass in just a few minutes, you would notice something incredible. The wolves grew smaller. Their faces became softer. Their fear faded. Their trust grew. And one day, without anyone realizing it, the first dogs were born.